The Art of the Pivot is brought to you by Signavio.
Hello again, Mark Jeffries here with another fascinating conversation. My guest today is Vinay Mummigatti. He is the Chief Automation Officer at LexisNexis, which is, as you know, a multi-billion-dollar global provider of legal, regulatory, and business information and analytics products. As the company's CAO, Vinay is the leading intelligent process automation and digital transformation across global business operations. He is a pioneer in implementing hyper-automation strategies and platforms across industry value chains, and is an industry expert in emerging technologies across AI, machine learning, RPA, intelligent process automation, advanced analytics, virtual agents, and hyper-automation architecture as well. That's a lot. As a result, his work has helped 3 Fortune 500 companies to increase revenues, reduce costs, and improve the customer experience. Vinay, welcome. Was that enough?
Oh, it was a mouthful, but thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Where do we find you today? Where are you located?
I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina.
Wonderful. Thank you again for spending some time with us. So just to put people in the picture, tell us about your work at LexisNexis and the types of projects that you're currently involved in.
My role at LexisNexis allows me to lead the strategy for automation and process excellence. And in my role, I have been involved with various programs and digital transformation initiatives that cut across all parts of the company. We are a global firm with operations in more than 100 countries. Predominantly, my focus is on various value chains like sales and marketing, order to cash, fulfillment activities, customer service, and content operations, where we deal with a large volume of content and data sources. And many of the projects we do cut across the key technologies, which you already mentioned earlier. But more importantly, I would say that some of the initiatives I would like to mention is we are applying natural language processing to a large part of our content operations, which is changing the way how we collect the content, how we transform it, and how we publish it. And we are applying robotic process automation across a lot of legacy systems and data sources, modernization. And of course, intelligent process automation is across sales and marketing, contract workflows, and customer onboarding. You name it, pretty large processes we have been automating using these technologies.
Now, before we get into what that's like and the challenges you face, I'm always interested to know what drives it within the business. Is it a C-suite conversation? Is it your team? Is it your end customers? Who drives some of these radical changes within the organization?
Oh, that's a great question. I would say pretty much we are focused on 2 key sources of that motivation. One is the customer itself. I mean, our customer demands and our customer value perception continues to change. And everything we do, all the way from products and services, has to be relevant to the customers. And we are constantly adapting to the customer needs. And that is what keeps us on our toes. And automation for us has been like, how do we improvise our products and services to make sure we are able to deliver the right products at the right cost, with the right quality, and at the right speed to the customers. And that keeps us always motivated to make sure we're making a difference in our customers' lives.
All right, that is good to know. And to be honest, that makes so much sense, because why do we do anything along the lines of innovation and improvement? We're trying to improve both internally and, of course, externally to all of those stakeholders. So there you are, busy improving operations on a global scale for a huge organization. I'm guessing there are challenges. What do they look like for you, and how do you go about managing them?
Well, when we take up any kind of automation or digital transformation programs, we come across challenges which are either due to broken processes, where we have processes which, there's no semblance of process, but there are activities going on all over the place. So the first order of priority for us is to how do we make sure that we are automating a good process and not a bad process. So that's where a lot of those challenges are surfacing out, because defining a new process and making sure it works well with a new technology is not always easy. And then comes the factors around the broken or legacy systems. We are a global country with many different ERP systems, many different CRM systems. How do we make sure that any automation or transformation we do is basically adapting to all these diverse legacy systems, which are often redundant, and sometimes they are on the path to sunset. So dealing with those legacy investments is very critical. And last but not the least, it is the culture that matters the most. Like, are we ready for change? How do we adapt to the change? How do we manage disruption and make sure we are successful at the end of the day? Those three challenges keep me awake at night all the time.
I'm sure they do. I want to dig a little bit into one of them, talking about, there's no point in investing in a bad process. There's no point in automating a disappointing process. But who decides which is a good process and which isn't? Because I'm sure in your organization and the others you've worked in, there are people so bought into a bad process, they would cry if it was gone, but somebody has recognized that it's no good. So who makes that decision?
Well, it is always a collaboration between my team, where we lead the process excellence as one of our foundational enablement activities, because we come with the expertise in terms of knowing how to define the process, how do we define a target state for a process which is ready for a digital adoption. And then when we work with the stakeholders and subject matter experts, many times our subject matter experts don't have a semblance of process in their mind. They always look at binocular activities along the way. For the first time, when we show them the process, it's a revelation for many of them. And it takes some time for them to digest it, because if they had actually seen the process, my job would have been very easy. So that's where we start off trying to give them the big picture, and then the journey begins from there. How do I optimize it? How do I get it ready? How do I rationalize it, etc.? Which is not very pleasant many times, but
it's part of the job.
It's part of life.
Right.
Yes,
you obviously live and breathe this stuff. You've written articles about customer centricity and process. How do you see the relationship between these two disciplines? I mean, you said at the beginning of the chat, you do this for the customers, but people talk customer centricity a lot, but they don't always act that way.
Yep. For us, customer centricity is at the heart of everything we do, whether it is product innovation or operations or services. And the way I look at it is when we are trying to implement any kind of a process transformation or automation, the key goal for us is like, what is the value we are delivering to the customer at the end of the process? Because we often have been in those paradigms where we say this is a front office process, or this is a mid office process, or a back office process. For me, there is nothing like three different classes of process. Everything touches the customer one way or another. So the goal for us is to make sure it's the cost at which point we are able to deliver the service or a product to the customer, the speed, and the third is the experience that we're able to create. And many times we always compare ourselves and benchmark not to the competitors in the same industry, but we look at the Googles and the Facebooks of the world and how they are creating disruption, and how can we be following those kind of models.
Fantastic, thank you. Now, I know that you know a fair amount about the area of intelligent automation. Could you tell us a bit more about what that is, how you define it, and how organizations like LexisNexis are actually using it?
Yep, great question. Intelligent automation is an evolving concept and a term. If you look back 5 to 10 years, what I used to call as intelligent automation meant just putting some business rules and decision automation along the process, or making integrations and creating real-time data available. But fast forward few years now, and then what for us in automation or intelligent automation means is creating systems that are emulating human intelligence. Basically, I'm creating automation solutions which can bring the ability to sense, think, and act like humans. And just breaking it a little more open here is, we look at three different patterns. One is at the highest level, how can I deal with unstructured content, which could be looking at images, looking at voice, looking at text. And this is where humans play a big role. And for me, the goal is not only for me, but for the entire team, it is about how do I take out the human dependency on low value added activities where I can probably build AI based systems. And next is about looking at end-to-end orchestration of processes, which is the second pattern. And that's where we are looking at business process management as another opportunity. And there are many activities along the way which are data centric, tactical, it's lift and shift, highly structured and deterministic, where robotic process automation is making a big difference at the ground level. So between these three broad parameters or patterns, I see most of the automations being handled today.
I mean, when people talk about the future of AI, they talk like you do, which is we're trying to recreate that human element, that moment where a human can look at something and instantly understand what is going on, that instant of almost perfect knowledge. How close are we to recreating that in AI? If, let's say, the AI story starts at 0 and this chalice is reached at 100, where are we on the journey between 0 and 100?
Well, by some scientists or I would say thought leaders in the space, we are at least 30 years away from reaching that stage of where I can say I have created a perfect emulation of a human brain or human performance. But I would say that in the last 5 years, we have seen a leapfrogging in terms of technologies, and what I couldn't even imagine 5 years back, I can deliver that today with the technologies. So we are exponentially moving forward. And I just hope that 30 years could probably be much shorter.
Well, I suspect it will, because I'm betting that you're saying 30 years based on current technology and our current understanding. But if you were surprised with what we've done in 5 years, I can't imagine what will happen 5 years from now.
The big part about what is missing is the emotional aspects of human intelligence. And for AI to grab that emotional aspect, it will take a longer time.
It's very emotional right now, so there's even more work for AI to do. You've got to strike a balance, right, between the automation element and the human element, and of course you've got to involve humans in trying to get to that automation element. So, any inside tricks on how you approach this and how you advise the organization what you're aiming for and what you can deliver in the short term?
For us, humans are at two levels. One is, I talked about customers earlier, because that's where we keep the human aspect of customer in mind when we deliver value. But more importantly, when I look at the employees at large, there are teams who are contributing to the automation process, but then there are teams who are also facing the outcome from an automation initiative. So there are two ways. One is, how can they contribute to the efforts involved in automation, being process experts, being operational leaders. But then when we deliver automation, sometimes jobs are getting affected. Sometimes we have to re-engineer and completely reorganize the departments, which causes a lot of pain many times for the employees. So for us as a global company, big focus for me and other leaders has been, how do we engage employees at every level of this journey, keep our communication channels open, explain to them why we are doing it, and then also make sure that we are training and enabling for the future of work. We just launched a massive training program and certification called CAPE University, which is Center for Automation and Process Excellence. And everyone in the company, 10,000 employees, have access to these trainings and certifications, so nobody feels left behind. It's completely democratized way of educating and enabling.
I love that idea. And I've also heard it said that it's how you frame the conversation as well. Artificial intelligence just sounds like, Skynet and Terminator. But if you alter it to augmented intelligence, suddenly it becomes a helping hand for the human element. Does that play a role, do you think, especially when addressing company culture?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I would say augmented intelligence is not only a good feel-good kind of a term, but it's also the reality. Because as I said, we are way far away from the perfect artificial intelligence. Today, most systems that we build, I would say 100% of the AI systems do have human in loop, where human is a validation point, but all the low end of the activities are being taken care by the AI systems.
Fascinating. I'd be interested to know what you've worked for different organizations, of course, now LexisNexis, but when you walk into an organization, how do you rate and measure the company's automation technology? There's probably a lot of people watching now who think, oh, yes, we have a fair amount of automation. It's all going rather well. But what do you look for? What's important?
Well, I worked for 3 companies, Bank of America, United Healthcare, and now here. For me, when I look at a company and assess the maturity of their automation program as a whole, I want to start seeing from the C-level leaders in terms of what is their vision for automation. Do they see automation as a tactical activity, push down the complete org structure, or do they believe that it is a competitive advantage for them and they need to drive it as a strategic investment? That's where it starts off. And then I also want to look at how centralized they are in their decision making. If you let it run across the organization, like do whatever you want, probably very soon you will find that things are fizzling out. good and bad outcomes, getting a bad rap for automation. But if you set up an enterprise organization like a center of excellence or a shared service, which drives strategy, standards, enablement, governance, portfolio management, and finally bringing everything together in terms of showing it to the investors, saying this is how we are deriving value, whether it is experience or revenues or cost, I think that is a matured state of automation program in a company.
Fabulous. Thank you for your insight. All right, let's start wrapping this conversation up. A lot of people watching are in charge of transformation, whether it's a small case of transformation or across the world. You lead global transformation in so many different ways. Any advice that you would share on pushing through this ongoing challenge? You've got people, you have technology, you have the changing state of the world. My goodness, the pandemic has become this catalyst for change. Yeah. But what advice would you share on leading a global transformation?
Well, I think the answer is hidden in the question you asked me, because when you talk transformation at a global level, it is like navigating a large container ship through rough waters. And essentially, if I were to look at one key factor for success, it is the captain of the ship that matters the most. So I would say that what kind of a leadership you have at the helm of leading global transformation, how experienced they are, how connected they are with all levels of the organization, and do they know exactly what outcomes and strategies they are trying to drive, that matters the most here. Rest of all the things will come in place if you have the right people at the helm of this program.
I love that. And as a PS to that answer, and this is something I care about deeply, the way you communicate that change, I'm guessing, is huge. Some people communicate it only from their tech perspective. Others almost translate it to the rest of the business. How do you approach communication?
Yeah, I think that's another key pillar here. Coming from almost like 15 years back, I was deep into the technology roots, but I had to change myself over a period of time to say that, it's not technology that matters the most. It is about connecting with the outcomes, making sure that answering the question to the larger audience in terms of why are we doing something? Why is transformation or automation important for us? Second is to look at making sure that everyone understand what is in it for me? What would they gain by the initiative? And be a prolific communicator, because the more we communicate, we put everyone at rest and make sure they are very comfortable. And I've seen this a big impact on the employee engagement. When we don't communicate, it drops drastically. When we communicate more and more, people feel comfortable and it goes up.
I couldn't agree with you more. Vinay Mummigatti, thank you so much for spending time with us and sharing some of your experience and, of course, your insight. Thank you.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for the opportunity.
The Art of the Pivot is brought to you by Signavio.